FM, KTY, and Tyler Kilgore. Celebrating
Taylor.
Well, yes, I went back and tried to kind of just fill in the gaps and go through the podcast that way. However, I found it easier to just go back and listen to the entire thing. And plus, I found it very informational and became a really big fan of the show. And so I rather enjoyed going back and listening to all the radio broadcasts. So, yeah, it was almost 50 hours worth of listening.
Wow, that how long did that take you? Probably several months.
It took me several months,
Yeah.
yes, sir. Balancing still a full course load and a job and everything. This was just a side project.
So really, you're our first bird call binger.
That's right.
Hey, I hadn't thought
I'm
of
a
that.
super fan.
I hadn't thought that. You know, Netflix are always having these shows, and HBO Go, and now Bird Calls has that. You can
There you
binge
go.
all the shows. I like that. Great. So Taylor, how many questions has Bird Calls fielded over the years?
Well, over the years, since 2013, we have had 486 total callers. And predominantly, they were male. The male sex has dominated the calls with 73% being male.
Wow.
And I use the term sex there for a reason instead of gender, because sex is a biological construct and gender is a social construct. So
Right.
although in today's world gender can be kind of an ambiguous term, in the biological sense, there are only two sexes that exist in nature.
That's right. So wow, almost 3/4 of the callers are male. That's
I
pretty
know. Come on,
interesting.
ladies. We got to get we got to losing the battle of the sexes here.
That's right. So explain to our listeners how we only ask for the caller's first name and where they call from. So things like Bob from Shreveport or Sharon from Tyler, they're quite anonymous. But if you could ask callers one or two more questions about themselves, what would you want to ask?
Well, the first thing I'd like to ask is probably not something people want to be asked. I'd like to know people's ages, because that can really give us a good demographic and let us know just who's listening and how old they are. And that can really tell us a lot about our population of listeners.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the male sex is calling the most. What about states? How many states have called in?
We've had calls from all over the United States, Georgia, Idaho, Maine, some very far off places. However, Texas and Louisiana are the two most common states. Texas barely edging out Louisiana by about 5% for the top state that calls in.
Wow, did Louisiana hear that? That Texas going to beat just a little bit?
This is all the Louisiana folks. Come on, Louisiana folks. Call in 800-552-8502.
All right, so
a challenge.
stepping down the geography, what cities are calling most frequently? You compiled that.
Well, the most common cities are Shreveport, Nacogdoches, and Bossier. So, I mean, you've got Shreveport and Bossier City right here, the home crowd. But then you've also got Nacogdoches with a large listening crowd, as well as Longview. It's up there as well.
Yeah, and Tyler's only been added, what, Bill, 1 year now? And I think that can be increased in great number once those people in Tyler know we're on the air. Okay, here's a question I have. What are callers asking about? Which topics come up the most? Because you compiled that as well.
Well, the most common reason people call in is for bird identification. A lot of people call in, they've seen a bird or took a picture of a bird or heard a bird, and they want to know or ascertain exactly what that was. But some of the most common species that people are interested in are woodpeckers, hummingbirds, especially purple martins. That's a really popular bird for suburbs, and a lot of people really enjoy them. Some other big ones, cardinals are a very popular topic, as well as Mississippi kites, which I didn't really expect and I didn't really know much about before this show. However, a lot of people are very interested in the Mississippi kite.
Cool.
Well, Taylor, we get a lot of interesting questions. So what are some of the most interesting ones from your perspective that you heard when you went through all of these shows that we've gotten from callers?
Yes, sir. Well, I'm glad you asked that, Bill, because one comes to mind whenever you ask that question. In July of 2018, a gentleman named Matt called in and asked Cliff, what bird reminds you most of a dinosaur?
Oh,
And so,
I remember that one.
yeah, so that was a really interesting question, and it actually sparked a few other calls, calling into, people calling in and saying what reminds them most of
Yeah.
a dinosaur. I think Crested Caracara was one of them, and I think, Cliff, you mentioned Roadrunner, Greater Roadrunner was yours.
And somebody sent in a picture of a young green heron, I believe it was. It was a young heron of some sort. I think it was green, and that looked very
Yeah.
dinosaur-esque.
Looked like a raptor.
Yeah, and I thought, yeah, I agree with you. That was a great question that Matt asked. What year was that?
2018.
2018. So last year. That was a good one. Yeah. Does there seem to be a time of the year when we get more calls to bird calls, or is there really no pattern at all?
It seems to be highly variable. Towards the end of the year, October, November, December, typically the calls kind of decrease. However, in January, they typically spike back up. And so really there's no pattern that's really identifiable by it. It's mostly just random, and I think it kind of depends on the month.
So curious, I've done research before, and a lot of it can be tedious. What was the part of this that you actually most enjoyed?
Well, I enjoyed learning about birds. I'm a birder myself, and so getting on with this project was really beneficial to me and my education as well. And so I just found it very fascinating. Got to learn about the natural things around me.
So you're assuming though that we're telling the truth on this show, right? So
Well, I think everyone is assuming that. We're trusting you.
Let's
Poor
hope
people.
so.
Well, you are listening to Bird Calls with our resident ornithologist, Cliff Shackelford, and you can give us a call right now, folks. We have lines open, and we do have 2 callers online, so we want to get to those. 800-552-8502, the number to call to get in right now. That's 800-552-8502. And our first question is from Shreveport, and it is a female, Mary, calling in. Mary, what's your question tonight?
First, let me say that I am a grandmother. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm a grandmother. So the other day, I was on Line Avenue in Shreveport in the Highland area, and I was coming out of a store, and I looked up, and way across, like 6 blocks away, in the very top of the tallest pine tree that I could see from there, looking east, there was an enormous, it looked like a penguin jumping up and down on this pine tree, on the top of the pine tree. And I determined, I tried to take some pictures with my phone camera, but I couldn't really get a good picture, and I determined I would go track it down.
Taylor, one of the hot things in entomology right now, doing the type of demographic work that you're doing, is geospatial analysis using GIS. Have you talked to anybody about that?
No, ma'am. We've looked at just the most common cities that have been called from and kind of compiled some data from that. So that's really the only spatial aspect we have for this project.
Well, I would really encourage you to look into that because it's really a hot, it's not a new topic, but it's getting hot and hotter. And you said that you wanted to develop new skills. And also being in wildlife management, I definitely think you ought to look into GIS if Stephen if FSU offers anything like that. And I don't mean to be a commercial, but we do have online GIS courses from LSUS. And so don't look around and ask about that because I think it would look really great on your CV or your resume in years to come.
Yes, ma'am. I've taken several GIS courses, and for some of my other upper-level classes, we do need to create maps. So I'm familiar with GIS. However, for this project, we didn't really incorporate it more than just compiling a map of the most common cities that we will put on our poster.
Well, Cliff, it sounds like a great show already.
Great.
I'll sign off now.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Burden. And by the way, Dr. Burden will be with us next Tuesday night for the next edition of What's Bugging You, another program that we do here at Red River Radio. You are listening to Bird Calls. We have all lines open right now at 800-552-8502 and 800-552-8502. And Taylor, I'm going to ask you one more question here, and that is, after this show, what do you plan to do with all this demographic data and the results that you've furnished?
Well, I plan on taking all of these data to the Texas chapter of the Wildlife Society conference. It'll be in Corpus Christi this year, and it's a large annual gathering for wildlife professionals and biologists across the state of Texas. And so basically I'll compile all of these data into a poster, a very visual specimen, and kind of just have a poster seminar there at the meeting, and other people can come by and view it and ask me questions and learn a little bit about how radio is still important in today's world as a medium for releasing information.
Yeah, and that's in mid-February of 2020.
Where is it at again?
In Corpus.
Okay, Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Yeah.
so folks, all of our fans can come down there and join you guys.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
That would be great.
We need some Corpus Christi callers now from Bird Calls, 800-552-8502. Well, Cliff, we do take photographs, and we did get one in this time, just one. But this is an image from Alan in Longview, and he writes, I've been seeing this bird for the last few days. It acts kind of like a mockingbird when feeding on the ground. It will raise its wings like a mockingbird, but the white color seems unusual. I have a few more pictures of it in a video that he took with his phone. We do have one of his photographs up on our website right now. And Cliff, this is, it's a pasty white bird.
Yes.
Beautiful feathers, but it does have the shape of a mockingbird. But
yes, and Alan nailed it. It is a mockingbird. It's just got a odd abnormality and lack of plumage, and it's what we call a leucistic. I'll spell that word, Leucistic, leucistic. So leucism is, most people would have called it an albino or a partial albino, but it's not. This is just a dilution of color. And so the bird's not completely white, but it's very pale. And so normally where a mockingbird would have a lot of gray, this bird is almost white. And so I encourage you to go to the website that Bill just mentioned. That picture's up, and you can see what a leucistic mockingbird looks like that one of our callers, Alan, sent to us, which is really cool. Thanks for doing that, Alan. And if people are interested, just Google the word leucism and look to see how it's defined. And then go to Google Images and put in leucism or leucistic birds, and you'll see all kinds of species of birds that exhibit this phenomenon known as leucism. Lots of robins and chipping sparrows and house sparrows and on and on. This is just an odd feature for every, millionth bird will have some odd feathering, some odd coloring, and this one is really noticeable when you see a typical bird like your backyard mockingbird that is kind of looks like he got dipped in white color, but you can still see hints of the mockingbird color. They're just diluted.
Now, is this a genetic abnormality?
It is. And so this is not an indication that the sky is falling. This is not an indication that there's any foul play. Can we use that on a bird show? Foul play?
Yes, I think.
It's spelled different. Okay. Yes. So, but it's a really cool picture, and I've seen a few leucistic birds, but I have seen a leucistic mockingbird. There was one in Nacogdoches somebody found about 20 years ago, and I remember seeing it. It was if people remember the old restaurant La Hacienda. There was one that was hanging around the grounds of La 20, maybe closer to 30 years ago, and it was really cool to see. So I bet Alan had a really cool time watching his leucistic mockingbird.
So there's no prophecies in any of the literature out there about if you see the white mockingbird, doom is on the horizon.
Yeah, I hope not. That would be bad. So
there you go. Well, you are listening to Bird Calls with our resident ornithologist Cliff Shackelford, and you can give us a call at 800-552-8502. That's 800-552-8502, and we do have another call online. We have all the other lines open, folks, so you can get in right now. Garrett from Nacogdoches, you're online with Cliff. What's your question tonight?
Hey, Cliff, thanks for taking my call.
Hey.
I'm in Nacogdoches, and I was sitting in my backyard with my wife last week, and we heard this sound about dusk, sound just like a monkey call, like a ooh, ah, 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 and I'm pretty sure it was not a barred owl, but it was striking.
Okay. Well, it was a barred owl. It's the monkey call of the barred owl. And let's see, Bill, if you have that one. It's
I don't know whether we got the
maybe
the
we don't
call?
because I imitate it. If we don't have it, I'll do it.
It was very I thought for sure it was a monkey, and my wife did not think it sounded.
Okay, that's the typical call that he's playing. That's not the.
It was kind of like that, but less hooty. I think I kind of know.
Not that one either. That's the squeal they do.
All right.
No, it is. It's.
I think those are the only two that I have.
I guess for a small fee, Garrett, I'm gonna imitate it for you online. How about that? So
great.
So it the bird watchers call it the monkey call. It's a cacophony, or actually it's caterwauling. Is if you look up caterwauling and barred owls, you'll hear.
Okay.
And on, and then later you'll finally hear the standard call. But what you heard was
First part was it for sure.
Yeah. So you heard the caterwauling of the barred owl, and it does sound like monkeys.
Is that kind of time you
yeah, it's definitely a pair thing. They do that when they're super excited about something, because you'll hear both of them kind of duetting that caterwauling together. And if there's another pair getting too close, if the territories are, up against a fence, so to speak, and the neighbors are getting a little too close, you'll hear a lot of caterwauling when they're upset. So, or they're excited. It doesn't mean it's bad communication. It could mean that they were excited and communicating. But that's caterwauling barred owls.
All right.
Yeah, that's cool that you heard it.
It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yep,
Hey, there was a flock of yellow-breasted birds in our yard this past weekend. Is there something coming through right now?
Flock of, you said white-breasted?
Small birds like warbler-sized, dark beaks. I didn't hear their call.
You said yellow-breasted or white?
Yellow.
Okay. I have been seeing a lot of pine warblers flocking up, and they've got a lot of yellow on them, especially the males, and they'll even feed on the ground. This time of the year, they'll be low in the trees. They're also high in the trees. They're all over. But I've noticed that in the last 3 or 4 weeks, pine warblers doing that, and maybe that was your bird. There's goldfinches as well. They're going to start showing up in big numbers here shortly. But they've lost a lot of their gold color. They get pretty drab. But I would think maybe pine warblers. And I saw a flock with a few people last week that was probably pushing 20 to 25 individuals, that's not unusual with pine warblers in the winter. They'll get in big flocks. So that's what I'm guessing you had. Yeah. Cool.
Hey, Cliff, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Garrett.
All right, thank you, Garrett. And you are listening to Bird Calls with our resident ornithologist, Cliff Shackelford, and all lines are open right now. You can get right in at 800-552-8502. That's 800-552-8502. When he talked about the cackling, I thought we were going to go to this one.
Oh, the laughing.
Yeah,
the
because
long...
that one reminds me kind of monkeys laughing up in the trees. So that's the pileated,
that's
of course.
That's the pileated woodpecker, right.
Which I never would have known it had I not been working on this show.
That's right. There's a job perk for you.
Yeah, now when I hear that in the movies, I say, that bird doesn't belong in Africa, you know.
Well, actually, that becomes a big issue if you like movies and television like I do. Knowing your bird calls can be kind of a problem because you're watching a movie that's maybe supposed to be in Africa, and you'll hear a blue jay,
right?
And that bird doesn't occur there at all, and it gets to be a problem. I think I've mentioned this before. There was a golf tournament in Kentucky, and they dubbed a cactus wren over and over, and bird watchers just called and wrote nasty letters because there are no cactus wrens in Kentucky. So, I think Hollywood has had to learn to get the bird sounds correct because there's 60 to 70 million bird watchers now in the U.S., and they're paying attention to that kind of stuff.
And they do have moonshine wrens in Kentucky, but no cactus wrens.
That's right.
You are listening to Bird Calls with our resident ornithologist, Cliff Shackelford, and you can get in right now at 800-552-8502. That's 800-552-8502. Any question regarding our birding world are welcome, and we hope that you will go ahead and call in right now. I do have a question for you, Cliff, especially with Taylor here, and that is if you wanted a good history book of the natural history and resources of our area, what would be your best recommendation for anybody who really wants to learn more about both the historical natural resources of this area, but also the current troubles and the current things?
You didn't tell me you were going to ask that question. That's a good one.
Yeah.
But it's one that I'm ready to field. Unless, Taylor, do you want to field it first? Do you have a recommendation? Because I do. And they don't have to be the same answer. So
no, sir, I'll leave it to your good judgment.
And this is when I give talks to college groups like at Taylor's University at SFA, I do mention that the best reading assignment you can make if you want to learn about the ecology of the piney woods, and this would apply here in Louisiana as well. It's a book called Land of Bears and Honey by Joe Truitt and Dan Lay. It was published by UT Press, and I think it was in the 80s. I don't remember the actual year. I would have been prepared, but this is a good question that I wasn't prepared for. But I do know the title, again, Land of Bears and Honey by Truitt and Lay, and it is the best part of it, it's a really good read. And I would encourage that book for anyone listening to this show that's in the listening area or even afar. It's just a very good readable book, and it explains how this is a land of fire. That was a big part of the forest system here, and you can learn a lot more about the ecology in a very readable format. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. Especially, I'm looking at Taylor, who's sitting next to me, and now he's got his homework assignment, Land of Bears and Honey, and he's going to have it read by the spring semester.
I already did 50 hours of listening. I know I might need a little more time for the
Yeah, there you go. Good answer. Good answer. You're exempt, but all the kids in your classes need to read it for sure.
Well, that's good. I'll definitely remember that.
And the readability of it, that's, because I've read a number of books on, the local ecology, and some of them are just not readable.
Exactly. I'm not going to recommend a textbook type read that's going to put you to sleep. This one will not put you to sleep. If you have any interest in nature, you're gonna love it. And so, unfortunately, both the authors have passed away, but by producing this book, their legacy lives on, and their knowledge and passion live on. So I really encourage people to get a copy and read it. It's fantastic.
You are listening to Bird Calls with our resident ornithologist, Cliff Shackelford, and you can give us a call at 800-552-8502. That's 800-552-8502. And we do have two callers online. George from Bossier, please hang on the line for a few minutes. And Krista Lynn from Shreveport, you're up next with Cliff. What's your question?
Hi, Cliff.
Hey.
Really pleased to be able to talk to you. I listen to you every week.
All right.
For the past 10, 11 years, I have worked at a camp at Walter B. Jacobs where there are a number of birds of prey housed there. And so I find myself feeling like, a mediocre ornithologist because I like to, when I see them out in public, when I'm driving around, I like to point them out. But sometimes, because they're so far away, it's hard for me to really make out what it is.
Yeah.
So, like Mary, who called earlier, was talking about the hawk, and I assumed it would be a red-tailed hawk as well because I live in Highland, and I know for certain I've seen some red-tailed hawks around. But I wonder, how often do we encounter other birds of prey in Shreveport this time of year? I know I can identify a hawk pretty much when I see the distinctive tail, but sometimes the tail doesn't look too red. So I don't know if it's a falcon, if it's a kite. What is really going to populate this area this time of year, and what can we expect to see around the evening time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to start by saying that the red-tailed hawk comes in so many different color patterns that no two often look alike. So this is the larger, and you're familiar with it because you've worked with them. This is the larger, chunkier, stockier hawk, and so red tails. It can be a red tail over and over, and you're looking and going, it sure doesn't look like the last one, but they don't all look the same with red tails. There's so many different color varieties. A couple things that they have in common: most of them have what we call a belly band. It's some irregular streaking across the chest or belly, and that's usually pretty uniform. That's on the belly.